Hi everybody, it's Troy from BDN Portland here. You know, I just got done writing a story about the history of cannabis in Maine, how it went from legal to illicit and back again over the past 150 years or so. And I'm going to give you the highlights of the story right now. So if somebody could dim the lights, thank you. And how about the first slide? There we are. In 1858, cannabis-based patent medicines are advertised on the front page of the daily newspaper in Bangor. Recreational alcohol was banned in 1851, but pot was still legal. In the 1880s, muckraking journalists like Samuel Hopkins, along with the American Medical Association, start calling for the regulation of widely available over-the-counter medicines containing cannabis and more dangerous opium derivatives. In 1906, Congress passes the Pure Food and Drug Act, requiring all medicine labels to clearly disclose their active ingredients. Then in 1913, Maine begins to implement a series of statutes regulating all narcotics, including cannabis. And by 1915, all recreational use of the drugs is outlawed. In 1914, Congress regulates the amount of opiates in medicines with the Harrison Act of 1914, but that act does not regulate cannabis. In 1934, Maine signs on to the National Uniform State Narcotic Drug Act, which includes cannabis. It codifies previously conflicting state laws, but cannabis is still available with a doctor's prescription. Then in 1937, the federal government starts regulating cannabis. With the Marijuana Tax Act of 1937, the law requires anyone selling it to pay for a tax stamp. And this effectively drives it further underground because coming forward to pay the tax would force someone to criminalize themselves under state laws. In 1939, Maine Senator James Chamberlain, a Republican from Brewer, introduces a bill mandating a life sentence for anyone caught possessing or selling or even giving away cannabis. The Bangor Daily News editorial page calls Chamberlain's idea righteous. Then in 1949, 3 young musicians plead guilty to smoking cannabis in Maine's first federal pot conviction. Each is given 2 years of probation. In 1962, simple possession of cannabis becomes a felony in Maine. First-time offenders can get 2 to 8 years in jail. And then in 1966, the University of Maine expels 2 students for smoking cannabis. One is later convicted of the crime of inhaling it. In 1968, a retired Maine U.S. Congressman and ambassador, Stanley Tupper, he was a 2nd District Republican, he describes cannabis as non-addictive and says penalties for possession should be reduced. In 1976, after years of legislative hearings, Maine decriminalizes possession of less than 1.5 ounces of cannabis. It does not legalize it, but it does reduce it to a civil charge akin to a speeding ticket. But the war on drugs is still full on in the nation. And in 1980, a ship with 34 tons of cannabis is seized in Stonington. 2 years later, a freighter with 30 tons is caught docking at a Bremen lobster pier. In 1999, in a citizen-initiated referendum, Maine becomes the 5th state in the union to legalize medical cannabis. In 2014, Portland residents vote overwhelmingly to remove all local criminal penalties for possession, for any purpose, of up to 2.5 ounces of cannabis. South Portland follows suit a year later. Then, in 2016, in a voter referendum, Maine legalizes all personal use quantities of cannabis. But then in 2017, Governor Paul LePage blocks implementation of the state's cannabis legalization law. Could I get the lights, please? Thank you. And then in 2018, the legislature overrode the governor's veto. So here we are in 2020 on the verge of legal retail sales of cannabis, just like we had about 150 years ago. Those are just the high points. If you want all the details, get a subscription to the Bangor Daily News and read the story. You'll be glad you did. See you later.